Hey, how's everyone doing today? Good morning, good morning. A lot of us are still joining, so let's just wait for a few more minutes and then start. All right. Good morning, everyone. How are y'all doing today? I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for asking. Okay, to start off, I'm gonna address some issues which are regarding the assignments, I think. So, the first few assignments, they were just based on completion. So, if you have received 1 out of 2, likely it's because um, your assignment wasn't complete. But then again, for those who have submitted in multiple submissions, but you have submitted everything, we're still going through those. There was an issue from our end with multiple submissions that we couldn't see, but that's sorted. So we're still going through those. So if you have submitted everything in multiple submissions, you don't have to worry about it. You're gonna get your grade upgraded. But other than that, if you have received a 1, I would suggest you take a look at the question for the lab and then look at your answers again. If there is still time for submission, you can definitely resubmit. That's always an option. So yeah, I would say take a look at those, but the first few labs were just based on completion. So we divided it into 2 parts, as in labs and assignments. So far the labs, those are just based on completion, and the assignments, those are graded. So for those, the graded ones, you'll be probably getting a more detailed answer regarding maybe what's wrong or what could have been improved. All right, so that's not something you don't have to worry about right now. All that being sorted, now today, Samina, you have a question?
Yes, I have a question. So when we have our labs, we have lab 1 and lab 2. Sometimes we are done lab 1 and lab 2 is incomplete at that moment. So is it a way by which we can submit lab 1 and come back to lab 2? Because then when I do it, then what we have to do is we have to resubmit lab 1 as well.
Um, so the idea is like you could do it all together once the whole thing is done. Or what some people have done, they did multiple submissions where they submitted lab 1 once, then they submitted lab 2 again. So they did that as well because we can check from our end multiple submissions and what you submitted.
Right. So, but when if we do a multiple submission, then we have to resubmit lab 1 again, right? Because
Not necessarily, but I mean, I would suggest since if you're submitting lab 2 as well within time,
mm,
why not submit it all together? Then the whole thing stays in one place and you don't have to submit it again and again. Just do
okay,
one complete submission and you're done.
okay, okay.
All right. So, all that being said, Samina, do you still have a question?
No, sorry, I'll just put my hand down.
All right. Okay. So far, what have we learned? We have learned how to code in JavaScript, and I believe you guys have a strong idea about how to do it. And then very recently, we have learned how to, yes, GitHub as well. So recently, we have learned how to code with HTML, CSS. Now, all of you know that when we are just creating a website with HTML and CSS, the website is static. Static how? In a sense, it's just displaying the design. It doesn't really do much. Now, in order to make the website dynamic and more interactive, we use JavaScript to amp it up a little. So essentially, a lot of back-end work that we see from a website, fancy animations and everything, they are handled using JavaScript. Now, um, there are a few components that you should know when it comes to using JavaScript and HTML, CSS all together, like integrating all that. Do you guys have any idea about what the DOM is? I believe it was covered in one of the lectures, if I'm not wrong. Okay. Yeah, so not to worry, we are gonna go through that for this lecture. What I will do, I will start presenting. How do you spell it? Just DOM, basic DOM. Yeah, document objective model. It's kind of like a tree structure. All right, let's get into it now. Let us start. Is my screen visible for you all? All right. So to start off, let's try to understand what's the difference between HTML and DOM. Okay, so we all know what HTML is. It's just a static markup language that helps you design, structure different contents, right? Now, what's DOM? The document object model. It's more of a live and more dynamic way to represent an HTML structure. Now, DOM over here, you can use that to manipulate HTML, but HTML, you cannot use that to manipulate DOM. These are one of the key differences. So everything you see in HTML can be actually done through the DOM. Or in other words, can be done through the DOM because of JavaScript. Now, it essentially is just the structure of HTML. So you know how HTML file goes, right? Head, body, and everything. So what DOM does, it turns that into a tree structure, making it easier for us to understand the levels of nesting. Because we know for one tag, you could add multiple tags inside of it. For example, if you're taking maybe a header tag, you can add span, div, image, whatever you like inside. But if you're creating sections inside as well, at one point when there's a lot going on, it might get confusing, but the DOM simplifies it for us using a tree structure. Okay, so that being said, let's move forward. So yeah, like I said, DOM simplifies it into a tree structure, making it easier for us to understand. But now, how do we traverse in between the DOM? Traverse essentially just means like moving around inside the DOM. And how do we define them? So a DOM essentially divides it into parent, child, and sibling relationships. Now, using those, you can move up and down across the DOM. So what do I mean by parent, child, and sibling relationships? We will see that with code in a bit. We'll start coding very soon. I'm just kind of giving you a rough idea of what it is. That way, later on, when I'm giving you examples, you guys can understand what's going on. So, so far it's clear, right? How we traverse along a DOM using what? I haven't really shown how, but mostly what. So it's parent, child, and sibling relationships. Okay. Now, you know how we can interact with the website, right? With your mouse, with your keyboard. You can do a lot of different actions. So these actions, these are called events. Now, what are the types of events? We won't we won't be using all of it all the time. There are a few common ones that we use most of the time, but it's good to know all of them so that if ever you need it, you can definitely use that. So first of all, we have mouse events, which essentially accounts for anything you do with the mouse, maybe scroll up, scroll down, click. Then we have keyboard events where we're clicking the keyboard and all that. Then window events, it's essentially resizing and everything about the whole window structure. Then form events where we're taking information in a form. Then drag and drop events. We're going to go into detail for all of these a little more. So mouse events. These are 5 of the mouse events that we have. We have click, which is essentially triggered by a mouse button click. Mouse down, which is fired when the mouse button is pressed down. Mouse up occurs when the mouse button is released. Mouse over means it's fired when the mouse pointer enters an element. Mouse out is triggered when the mouse pointer leaves an element. It's kind of like hover, the hover element, remember? Okay, so that's that. Now keyboard events. So for keyboard events, what we do, we have key press, which means it's triggered when the key is pressed and released. Key down is when a key is first pressed down, it triggers an action. Key up is fired when a key is released after being pressed. So these are few events that you could use while creating your dynamic website that makes your website look much, much better. And the functionalities, they improve by a lot. Then we have the load or window events. Now, first we have load. It's fired when a resource and its independent resources have finished loading. What's unload? It's triggered when a resource is being unloaded. Resize occurs when the browser window is resized. Scroll is fired when an element's scroll bar is scrolled. So all of these are small actions that we do on a regular basis for a website. But usually what we see when we are designing an HTML and CSS file, when we use these functions or when we do all these actions over here on a website, we can't really control what's going on. We just know this is like a preset thing. We don't have any control over it. By using JavaScript, you can control all that. Form events. So you can submit. That's essentially when a form is submitted. You can change. You can focus. Focus is when it's triggered when an element gains focus. Blur is fired when an element loses focus. These are all pretty self-explanatory, to be honest, but we are going to see the common ones very soon with a proper example. Now we have drag and drop events. So drag start is when an element is dragged. Drag end occurs when a drag operation is completed. Drag enter is when a dragged element enters a valid drop target. You know how you drag and drop files? That's something you could do with this. Drag leave occurs when a dragged element leaves a valid drop target. And what's drag over? Drag over is when an element is being dragged over a valid drop target. And drop is when a dragged element is dropped into a valid drop target. So these are essentially very similar, but the difference is from each and every one of them is that some of them are very specific, where they are just taking into account one particular part of a action. For example, if you think about the mouse button click, usually when we just click a button, something happens, but you could also manipulate how when you click something happens, when you release something happens. So these are some stuff that you should know about. That way, when you're doing a project, you could just think of it, oh, okay, this is something that exists. So we could do that. So that's essentially just giving you a rough idea about what we can and cannot do. I'm gonna give you some examples and start a code in front of you. That way you can understand what's actually going on. All right, so let me open up a file for myself. Should I open a new folder? Share my screen. Any confusion so far? Guys, are you with me so far? Questions? Okay, so let's begin. Now, for any website, what are the files that we need? Files and folders as well, honestly, because we do need folders too for images. So let's first create a folder for image. Okay, that's done. Other than that, what do we need? We need HTML file. What did I write? Let me write lecture. This is what, 34? Okay, so rename lecture 34.html. And let me create a CSS file that is style.css. Videos, you don't really need a separate one. I think just the image folder works, but you could, if you want, you could have the video folder as well. If you're handling a lot of videos, it's good to have a separate folder. Okay, so that's the basic ones that we need. But for today, we'll need another file, which will be a JS file, script.js. So we have all our files created and ready over here. Now let's go into the actual coding part. So let's start off with the HTML document. Now, the first thing you guys should know is how to integrate the JS file into the HTML file. So there are a couple of ways we can do that. but mainly we use this tag over here, script. So when you add a script, you also have to add a source for that script. Always remember, don't forget. And for this, the source will be script.js. Does this make sense for everybody? Okay, so for these, you guys should know a couple of things, which is, so this is basically we are normally declaring or just writing down a script or linking a script to the HTML file. But now you guys tell me that should it always be over here at the very end, or can we add it to the top as well? Can we add it over here? Can we? If we can, then what's the difference? Okay. So how it works is where you put the script or where you put this particular line, that is where the HTML file stops running and the script starts running. Is that clear for you? Like, if you put this over, yeah, of course I'll repeat. So wherever you put the script tag, that's where the HTML file essentially stops and runs the script for you. Now, my question is, what's the difference, right? Let me show you guys with an example. Say welcome class. Okay, so before we get to that, we should start coding in our JavaScript file as well. So wherever you put the script tag, that's where the HTML file stops running and the source you've added starts. Essentially, just pauses the HTML and runs the script for a bit, and then goes back to the HTML. So here in the HTML file, as you can see, we have a p tag. Let's actually run this. How about that? Okay, so I have this over here. Now, what I want to do is maybe I want to change the text for this. How do we do it? So for this, okay, let's say I want to change the color first. Let's do that. Let's go to style.css. Okay. Now for this, we can, now in order to change the color for a welcome class, what do we need to do? Just the color of the text. color, then colon, right? Now, let's do something different. Let's not do it through style.css. Let's do it through the JavaScript file. Okay, so for this, let's try something else. Now, when you are trying to connect JavaScript to a particular tag, there are a few elements that we can use or a few functions that we can use. So to start with, we have document the, okay, so let me just write down the names first, then we'll get to the actual code. Get element by ID. So that's one. What does this do? So this will essentially let you, guys, what do you think? I'm waiting for your answers. So what this does, it lets you call a tag from the HTML file using its ID. Yes. So it essentially connects you to that particular tag using its ID. Now, next we have, oh, I think I wrote it in the chat. Never mind. Okay, so now we have get elements by class name. So as you guys can remember, when we create a tag, we can give it an identity using either ID or even by class. So we should have options for both, right? We should be able to call a tag using its ID or even its class name. Why no space? That's because this is a built-in function from JavaScript that we use in order to call the tags. So essentially, we are just using the functions itself. The functions are named like this. Does that clear out your question? Okay. So get element by ID, get element by class name. We know these two. These are probably something you'll use a lot. So this is pulling elements from the HTML. Yes, it is. So it's just essentially connecting it to you. So when you write down get element by ID, and let's say over here, let's put an ID for this. ID, say test. So when you use get element by ID and then you call the p tag using the ID text, what it does, it just connects you to that tag and you can manipulate that however you like. You can change the color, you can change the size, however you wanna style it. But there are other ways you could call those tags as well. The other way is called query selector. Query selector. So what's a query selector? A query selector essentially just, where is it, HTML? Will just use the name of the tag, which is just P, and connect you to that particular tag. So in this case, if I wanted to use query selector to connect to that tag, I would just use this and then P. Does that make sense for everyone? Questions, anyone? Yeah, of course. Okay.
So they could be query selectors with multiple P's as well, right? The P tags. So how do we know, how do we associate which P tag is a query selector going to be?
So remember how for CSS, when you call a P tag, it's gonna change all the P tags? It's something like that. In those cases, if you have a very specific thing to change, get element by ID is very useful. Or you could just go into one tag. So for example, if there was multiple tags, so you could just go into body and then go into P as well. So you could use that concept of nested tags too. Tried to link my HTML with JS file last weekend, but the web page wasn't functioning. So I had to copy paste the file, HTML file between script. It should work. Well, let's see what happens. There's also the fact that where you pasted the script, that could also matter. Okay, so let's first do a function over here. Let's just change something, okay? So I'll just change this. Okay, so like I was saying, so query selector will go into that and just select this tag. But yeah, if there were like as answer to that question where you said if there were multiple p tags, just query selector, what would it do? It would just go for the first p tag actually, not all of them. But if you want to access all of the p tags, for example, if you have a list, okay, well, what just happened? Okay, say you have a unordered list. Li, and you have multiple list options inside. So if I write down this and then Li, will all of these change? No, just one of it will change, the first one. But if I want to change all of them, what I will do is I will use the function which is called, let's erase this first, query selector, and this is where the difference is, all. So if I do this, what it will do, it will go for all the li tags. Does it make sense? Okay. So let's forget about the unordered lists. Let's just stick to the p tag for now. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna give you examples with both get element by ID and get element by the keyword selector, the query selector. So for this, let's write down. So when we use these functions, the results of these, we have to store it somewhere. Like if you remember from JavaScript, when you used to call a function, you used to store its result in a variable. Is that correct? We do the same for these. So what we will do, let's write down const and then maybe say paragraph equals to, then let's try out the query selector. So always remember, before calling these functions, you need to write down document. Why? Because this shows that you're trying to look for that particular you're trying to use that function inside this HTML document over here, the connected HTML document. So document dot let's write down query selector, and inside let's write down p. Okay, so that's it. Now let's try to change the color. So now my connection with the p tag is saved in the paragraph variable. So use that paragraph dot, since we're styling it, we write style. And what are we trying to do? We're trying to change the color. Is equals to, what color do we do? Say yellow. Let's see if this works. See, I just changed the color from the JavaScript file. I didn't even do anything in the CSS file. The CSS file is empty. Does that make sense? But now what happens if this already has a color set in CSS? So let me just write down P. So for P, let me set color to red. This is very annoying. Oh, body should work. Or maybe, oh, that's because I didn't connect this. That's why. Okay. So I didn't even connect the script. That's why it's not showing. So over here, how do we link a script? You guys tell me the command. Sorry, CSS file. How do we link a CSS file? Anyone? Yeah, but how do you write it? So we first use the, exactly, someone already wrote it down over there. We write down link, and inside we have to write down the relation, which is style sheet. And afterwards, we do have to mention the type as well. In this case, our type is gonna be text slash CSS. Why would you say here it'll be style instead of style sheet? Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, let's go ahead. And so we wrote the relation, we wrote the type. Now let's write down the reference, which is style.css. Let me try it out now. There you go. Now my welcome class is red. So what if I do the same over here and try to turn it to yellow? Okay, so one takeaway from this is that whatever you have in the style sheet, it can be overridden using the JavaScript file. Does that make sense for everyone? All right. So now we know how to use the query selector. Does that make sense? Okay, let's see how the get element by ID works. Now, if I want to remove this and use the dot get element by ID, as you can see, it gives you options. You could just select it like that. I would likely write down, wait. What's the ID? It's test. So likely I would write down over here inside the quotation, just test. Okay, so again, let me comment these out. So we can see that our welcome class is red now. And I believe someone wanted to see the HTML file. I didn't really add much. I just added the p tag. That's about it. Okay, moving forward. So as you can see, I have nothing in my script right now. That's why it's just going for the style in my CSS file. So now for the JavaScript file, what if we take out the comments and make it an actual code? So now it's yellow again. Did you guys get the difference between get element by ID and query selector? Questions, anyone?
Can you just show me the HTML file in which you changed it to red?
So HTML, I didn't really change anything. It's just a p tag, but I did a little bit of CSS and changed the color to red. Okay. Which part are you confused about? Is it the difference between get element by ID and the query selector?
So I get what you wrote in the style.css, but how does because when you commented this out, it is can you just show me the lecture 34, the HTML file? I think maybe I'm missing something over there. So you have the style sheet over here, and the script is in the body, right? Okay. Maybe over
Okay.
here. Oh, I'm not calling the style sheet. Okay, that's fine. Okay.
Okay, so so far, let's just forget about the JavaScript file, okay? So far, what have I done? I just created a p tag and changed the color using CSS. You can see it's red. But if I want to do something, if I want to override it with the JavaScript file, there are two options I can use. One is the query selector, and the other is the get element by ID. Let me put it side by side. That way you guys can understand what's going on. So essentially, I'm performing the same task using two different functions. So it might seem a little confusing. So now for the query selector, do I still pass in the ID? Document in Java, is it an object? It's essentially like a function that we are calling. You know how we use functions and then we pass parameters? Okay, so back to my question. Do we still send in test as a parameter for this function? No, right? What do we write? Query selector and then P. Let's see if this works. It works. So let's now comment out this and refresh this. So it's back to red. But now if I use get element by ID, what's the difference between the two? Over here, I'm actually calling the ID of the tag, which is test. So over here, if I do that, it links to that particular tag using the ID and it changes the color to yellow. Okay, Marwa has raised her hand. I believe you have a question.
Yeah, why would I ever need to pick an ID over the P tag or vice versa? Like, would it, if I did the ID one, does it change everything inside of the element ID? And then the P tag is just for that one P tag. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know how it's a nested,
Okay,
um,
so I mean, I will go to a bigger example later on, but just to answer the question. So say there are multiple P tags and you want to change the color for only one. So let me do that, okay? Copy. Okay, so we have multiple P tags over here now. As you can see, only one of this is yellow. Why? Because only one of this, no, this is not right. All of the IDs cannot be same over here. So let me just remove IDs for all of this, okay? Just to make it clear. Okay, back to it now. Let's forget about this. Let's remove this as well. Let me comment this out. Okay, so we have multiple P tags right now, okay? Now, if I do this, what happens? The first one gets changed. Why is the first one only getting changed? Because query selector only goes for the first one. But if I want to change all of it, what should I do? But now, the thing is, will it work like that? Or do I have to do something else in order to change it? Let's go into this. Let me write down query selector all. So now over here, as you can see, it's not really changing anything. So let's get back to it, but I just want to keep the example as simple as possible, okay? Before we go into multiple ones, let's just try to make sure one of it is understood. So over here, let me write down ID again and ID test. Okay. So back to this. Let me change this over here. Change the color in CSS file. What color do you want me to put? Sure, blue. Well, that's because this is still there. Okay, so now it should be blue. Can you show something that can only be done in JS? Yeah, we're gonna go into a bigger example. For that, you're gonna see why JS is important, why JS is needed. But for now, just make sure you guys understand what these do. So usually query selector and element get element by ID are something that we use a lot. Now, for this, as you can see now, it's just taking up the color for the style.css. But if I go to a JavaScript file and change either of these, the color goes to yellow. I feel like when we go to a bigger example, like a proper website, you're gonna have a better idea of what's going on. If we apply change color in both the JS and CSS file, the CSS will apply, right? No. So the JS file always overrides the CSS file. Remember that. If you're trying to set a color through both, the JS file will override the CSS file. Does that make sense? Questions? Anyone? Yeah, so essentially I'm doing both of them in different ways, but I'm doing the same thing. Or maybe I could even change the size for this. So let's use this to change the size. How about that? Or maybe let's change the background color. How about that? I think that's gonna be a better example. So let's write down body over here. Change this to maybe green. Okay. That's interesting. That's because both are in the same one. Okay. So what have we seen? we have seen that the color's changing, but the one that's at the very top, that's changing, not the one at the not the second one. So what's wrong with the second one? Body doesn't really use color. If I want to change the background color, I have to write this, right? Now let's try. Okay, so I use both of them to do different things. So I use get element by ID to get me the p tag. And over here, I'm using the query selector to connect me to the body tag. And I'm just changing the background color to green. Does that make sense for everyone? Hannah, you have a question?
Yes, I have a question. Always I should create a variable if I want to style everything. Like here, I create a variable paragraph for body. It's gonna be for the tag body, or I should, if I want to change many things for this paragraph one, like another, let's say, attribute or another stylish, I should keep
So
creating.
essentially, this will work like this. You know how we used to write body, then this? Something like that.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, you could also do it in one line. You don't have to write down this in general. Like, it's good to have a variable, but if you want, you could do it like this as well.
And what's the type gonna be for paragraph here? Is it
Sorry?
like the paragraph variable?
Yeah.
It's gonna be like let's say object or array or the type of the paragraph.
Just take this as a constant.
Mm-hmm.
It's just it essentially just stores the ID for that tag. That's what it does. And later on, it just references it when you're trying to style it.
Okay. Okay. And it's including like the body. It's including all the containers inside it.
Yes. So like I said, when you're styling the body, what do? You write body,
Okay.
you do
Dot.
this, then
Okay.
color. You know, you remember that?
Yeah,
So
but I
it's
mean
something like that.
like inside the body I have B, for example.
For
I should.
that, you have to call B then, not body.
Oh, so it's not like hierarchy. It's
No,
gonna be
it's yeah,
okay.
yeah, exactly.
Okay, got it. Got it. Thank you.
Okay. So if these are done, so okay, the example I was giving you over here, as you can see, I used get element by ID to just fetch me the p tag, and I'm using the query selector to get me the body tag. So for the body tag, I'm just changing the background color to green, and for the p tag, I'm changing the text color to yellow. Any questions about what I did so far? Okay, if not, let's go to a bigger example then. Let me see if I have anything more to add to this. Okay, let's go to an actual example now. Let me get rid of this. Let me open up the previous code that we did. Open folder. All right. So let's get rid of this. Let's put this over here. Okay. Is the new website visible? All right, so for this one, we don't have a script file for this. All right, I was gonna show you guys something, I forgot. Let me go back to that old file. Open folder. Okay. So if I go back to this, now in the HTML file, remember I was telling you guys at the very beginning that where you put the script, it matters. So right now the script's over here, but what is the point to use script? You will see. For now, I'm just showing you guys the basics. Let's just try to understand the basics first, and we'll get the point of it when we start using it in an actual example. Because right now, it's not very dynamic. I'm just showing you guys how to change colors. But when I go to a proper website, I'm going to show you how to actually integrate like a proper code into it. So, okay, for now, no break. Let me just finish this up and I'll give you guys a 5 minutes break. So yeah, like I was saying, for this over here, when the script, I put it at the end, it runs just fine. But what if I cut this out and put it over here? Will it work the same? It doesn't. Why? So now I'm just gonna tell you guys how the script actually works based on hierarchy. So when I'm putting the script at the bottom, it runs the whole HTML file and then goes to the script. So if I put the script over here, as you can see in the script, I'm calling the body, the p tags and all that. If I put the script over here, does the p tag exist before this? No. So in order for the JavaScript file to recognize those tags, the tags need to exist. In other words, the HTML file needs to produce them while running firsthand. Now, there are also other concepts such as defer. What defer does is, let me just annotate on the screen. I think it's going to be easier. Okay. So normally, when we write the script normally without defer or async, what happens, the HTML file runs, but then when it sees that there's a script running over here, it will run the script and then get back to the HTML file. But when I use defer, what happens is the HTML file keeps on running. It will complete the whole HTML file, but in the meantime, it's gonna run the JavaScript file as well. But it's not gonna activate it, or it's not gonna use anything from it. It's just gonna run the JavaScript file. And once the HTML file is done, okay, so let me put headings as well. Text, normal case. So what's a normal case over here? When we are just writing down the script like this. So you guys do understand this is like the most normal way of declaring a script. Okay. Now, if I write, now to explain this, how it works is the HTML file will keep on running. Let's take the blue line as the HTML file. It will keep on running. When it finds the JavaScript file, which is the yellow line over here, it will stop the HTML file and keep on running the JavaScript file. And after it's done, it will go back to the HTML file. So everything is happening in a sequence. But if I write down defer over here, how it works is for defer, let me just annotate. So for defer, what happens, the HTML file will keep on running, but it will simultaneously run the JavaScript file. But as you can see, it stops and shows all the changes to the user in the normal way, but in the deferred way, it doesn't show the changes from the JavaScript file till it finishes running the HTML file. Does that make sense? Yeah, I have another option over here. So before we ask which one's better, I feel like you guys should know about the other one, which is async. Now, how does async work? Let me just write it down here. Async. So it works in an asynchronous manner. What happens is in async, it will keep on running. In the background, it's gonna run the JavaScript file as well. But the difference between async and defer is both are running JavaScript files simultaneously, but for async, when the JavaScript file is complete, it will show the changes and then it will go back to the HTML file. Does that make sense? So in defer, it's running the JavaScript file simultaneously, but it doesn't show the changes until the very end. For async, it runs it simultaneously, and when the JavaScript file is done running, it will stop the HTML, update the JavaScript changes, and then go back to the HTML again. So now, which one is better is depending on you guys, on what kind of script you're running. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a script that you're making. It could be a script that you're importing from somewhere else. That could be something as well. But for a very simple code, the normal way of doing it is also fine. This essentially just kind of affects on the runtime. That is probably its best use case. So in which case would async work? For example, you're running a heavy script, but you need to show the changes on the go. So for those cases, it will keep on running both the HTML and the JavaScript file. Then once the JavaScript file is done running, it's just gonna show the changes and then go back to the HTML. So for small codes like this, it won't matter, but when you go to a heavy code for which probably the runtime matters, for those usually async, defer, and the normal ways usually kind of bring like a small difference. So Najla has a question. A script in After Effects is a series of commands that tells me to perform a series of operations usually used to automate repetitive tasks or to perform complex things. Yeah, essentially that's what it's doing, right? I mean, based on the example that I've shown, you probably didn't get a lot because I'm just changing colors, just to give you guys an idea of how the element by ID, the query selectors, how they individually work. But what I'm gonna do, if you guys don't have a problem with these, let's go on a 10-minute break. let's come back and see the previous website that we have built, and we're gonna do some changes on that using JavaScript. Is that okay? All right, so let's do that. Stop sharing and see you guys in 10 minutes. All right, so we are back. Let's check out our website. So I already have it open. Can you guys see my screen? All right. Okay. This is a pretty standard website. Not a lot happening. We have the form, we have our recipes, we have our navigation bar. What is something that could instantly make this look much, much nicer? So let's try to change the theme of this website. So let's start off with changing the colors. Later we can, I'll show you guys how to change with images as well. But for now, let's check out the one that just changes colors. Okay, so tell me this, that in order to change the theme of a website, usually what do we do? What's the first thing that we need? The first thing that we need is a button that helps us change colors, right? Or sometimes it gives you options of different themes, whether you want the normal theme or the darker or maybe the colored theme. So for that, let's create a drop down over here. Yeah, dark or light. In general, over here, we don't, for a dark theme, what colors would you guys suggest? Give me options. What would you go for the nav bar and what would you go for the body? What colors? Black and gray. Specify whether like you're talking about the nav bar or the body. Black, I don't know. Okay, we can try that. Okay, so before that, what do we need? Since we're gonna add this to the navigation bar, let's add a list. All right. Now, inside the list, we need something that will help us toggle around the different themes. So for now, let's just create a drop down and see how it works from there. Like a button, it's pretty simple, straightforward, but I want to show you guys the drop down part. It's the same idea as a button, but you just need some additional concepts. All right, so for this, let's write down, how do we write down a drop down? How do we start? How do we create a drop down? Select, right? So let's do that, select. And inside the select, we need options, correct? Options. So for the first option, let's call this dark theme. Dark theme. But also we're missing something over here from this option tag. What is that? a value. So every drop-down menu over here returns a value. In this case, would we need to label? I mean, we would, but let's just go step by step. So for value, let's just write dark. Or maybe, yeah, let's just write dark. Okay. So let me copy this and create another option. So once we go to the dark option, we need an option for the regular one as well, right? So let's just name this regular. It's like, okay. So after all that, we also need something to be able to calling this select tag as well. So let's put down a ID for this. Team select. Let's call it that. Okay. Let's run this. So as you can see, we have a drop-down menu over here. Okay. Now let's try to add functionality to this. I don't think I have a script over here, so let me create a script file. Script.js. Right, that's good. Now, what else do I need to do if I'm trying to use script? We need to add it to the HTML file. Yes, we have to link it. So let's do it over here. Script. Source. Script. It's the wrong one. Script. Named it script, right? Interesting. Ah, okay, that's why. Delete. Over here, let me write script.js. This should work now. Okay, back to this. Script.js. So our linking should be complete. Now, let's go into the script and try changing the theme for this website. For this, let's first, okay, what's the first step? We have to get the value from the drop down in order to understand what kind of theme the user is looking for. So in this case, let's create a constant. Let's create a constant. Let's call this theme select. All right. Theme select. Sorry, what are you doing here in JS? Okay. So as you can see, we have a drop down over here that will help us change themes. But can HTML do that itself? HTML or CSS, can it do that? No, not from the drop down at least. For CSS, you can change the whole theme, but changing the whole theme on a button click For that, you'll have to go through a lot of different process, a lot of different files. But if you use JavaScript, just one simple function should work. Yes, like Samina said, it's static, so it's not going to be that easy to change themes when you are using it just HTML and CSS. You'll likely have to create the same page with a different color scheme. Okay, so let's go for this now. Let me link it to this select tag over here. So I already set the ID. Let's use our get element by ID method. And for this inside, I will write theme select, since that was our ID. Okay, now that being said, how do I make sure that when this is clicked, say when dark theme is clicked, we change the color? So we need something that will listen to what we are trying to do over here. So for these, we use add event listener. So add event listener will help you convert this click into something the code will understand. So let's write this down. Say theme select dot add event listener. So for add event listener, just follow the steps that I do, okay? So for add event listener, you have to open up a parenthesis, and inside you have to write down, in this case we're clicking it, so we write down click, then comma, and then we have to send in a function. Now you could write the function outside and just send the function as a parameter, or you could just write down the function here as well. I'm just gonna write down the function in the same line. So function this, and then inside this, I do the curly braces. Are you guys with me so far? Questions? Any questions about what I did? All right, so I'll move forward. Inside the function, I want to store the value that I'm getting from each of these. So you see, for light theme, I had set a value over here. For dark theme, I have set a value. So now I need to take these values after a click. So what do? Let me create another constant, and let me call it selected equals to theme select. Over here, I am calling this variable, which stores the connection to this dropdown. So you can add this as a parameter and next to it too. Yeah. Like I'll show it in two different ways, but let me just finish up the function first. Okay, so I'm just calling in the variable that holds the connection, and then I'm gonna put dot value, since that is what we are storing. No, that's not what I want. Value. Okay. So this will store the value inside the selected variable. Now, after I'm done with that, I need to make sure that I am changing the colors, right? Before I do that, let me just create a if else inside the function. Why do I need a if else? Anyone? To check which theme. Correct. So inside this, I am gonna check if selected is equal to, what did I write down here? Say dark. Is equal to dark. So if it is dark, then it's gonna go ahead and change the colors for the website. So what's the first thing it will change? It will need to change the color of the body. So let me write another constant inside, say constant B. So constant B, for this, let's use document dot. So I don't really have a ID for the body. I can just use query selector to just store the link between the body tag and the JavaScript file. Are you guys with me so far? Questions, anyone? Okay, so moving forward, now I have stored the connection over here. Let me change this. So B dot, now what? I have to change the color. So for that, what do I have to do? I'm just changing the style, correct? So let me change the style, B dot style dot, what's the exact attribute I'm changing? I'm changing the background color. Okay, so you guys said you guys want the background color as gray, correct? Let's see if that works. So I'm changing it to gray. And I also need to change the navbar color. Constant n is equal to document dot query selector. Okay, so for this, do we have to change the color for the navbar or the header? What do we have to do? Anyone? Header, correct? Because if you see over here, the entire header file holds just the navbar itself. So the color that was changed was inside the navbar. Does that make sense for everyone? Okay. So for the header, I already have an ID that says head. So why not use that? So let's use get element by ID and let's put in head. All right. So now if I want to style this, let's set the background color to black. I can use the query selector as well, but since I already have a ID over here, why not use that? Okay. So for background color, you guys said you want black for this. Okay. Let's try it.
You should write equal black.
Sorry?
Should make it equal black, not just send it as
All
a
right. Guys are correct. That's where I messed up. Okay, so there you go. So now we have a dark theme for this. But you can see we can't really get back to the light theme, can we? So for that, I'm gonna use the else over here in order to change all of this to the original colors. So let me just copy paste this and I'm just gonna change the colors over here. So the body, I believe, was this color. So for the body, I'm gonna set it to this, and the header was this color. Command C. All right, so let's see. Dark theme, light theme. Questions, anyone? Yes, Samra, you have a question?
Yeah. So I'm wondering why are we like writing the else situation here? So if this is the case, it will do that. If not, it will do the whatever it was a previous thing. Like why are we doing that? Again, it
Okay.
checks.
Yeah, so what I'm doing over here, since I'm using a drop down, so the
Hmm.
color's only changing when I'm clicking on the drop down items. I'm pretty sure there's another algorithm where you can just press one button and you can change the color for the whole theme.
Yeah.
That's also possible. For that, you'll have to write the else in a way where you have to change colors every time the button is clicked. You have to alternate between the two colors. So for that, the algorithm is going to be a little different. Is it
No,
clear?
but it's still here. Like if you click on drop down and you select dark theme, then the JavaScript file be run, and it will convert the theme to the dark.
Yeah.
And then okay, so you are saying if we are going to the light theme, it should have a code for the light theme as well.
Yeah, like, okay, let me just erase this for you. Now you see. Okay, so now for the light theme, you see I'm trying to go, but nothing's happening because it doesn't read anything from the light theme.
Got it. Oh,
Does
thank
it
you.
make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Oh,
Can we define N and B above if condition? Because we won't define it once more. Yeah, you could do that as well. But a potential problem that could be for like multiple changes, the values might change as well. Just think, does it hamper it? No, it doesn't matter. You could just, yeah, you could just declare the B and N variables before if you want. That's also possible. All right, so we have the light theme now, do we? No, we don't. So dark theme, light theme. Okay, so for this, we have changed it based on colors. Now, what if I wanted to add an image? It's going to be the same process. The only thing that's going to change is for maybe, let's say we have to change the, let's say for the dark theme, we're going to add an image. So for the body, instead of background color, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add background image. Does that make sense? And inside, I'm just gonna put in URL. And the same way we usually do it, img, and then I have to just paste the name. It doesn't really give you the option over here. So if I go to my image file over here, wait, this shouldn't be it. Okay, so I got it. Let me just change this to this .jpg and this. Okay, so I've set in the URL for the image, and now for the head, it can't be black, so I have to change it to transparent. Now let's see if this works. Yeah, there you go. But when I do this, the light theme, you see, there's something wrong with the background image. Why? Because if you see, the background image is already set. And like we said, the JS file always overrides the CSS file. So over here in the CSS file, we don't, even though we don't have a background image, the JavaScript is imposing a background image. So what do we do for this over here? We will write down for body b.style dot background image. Inside this, I'm just gonna write none. See if it works now. Dark theme, light theme. Does it make sense? Again, how you want to design your website, that's up to you if you want to use textures or images. But I'm just showing you the options of what's possible and what's not possible. In some websites, actually, images are pretty good. It always depends on how you're laying out the structure. But images, if used properly, it can look really nice. Questions so far? Anyone? So do we understand the basics of it doesn't work for you? I can check it out in the lab. That's not a problem. What does the background do with the amount of transparent? So you can see over here, we have a tag that's essentially overriding the background color as well for the header, but nothing's really dealing with the image. It does change the color, transparent percentage. So for that, I believe you use opacity based on how much you want to blur it out. But in this case, if you just use transparent, it's gonna make the whole thing transparent. For opacity, there's a particular way of declaring it. For example, I could have written this as, I don't know if this would work, but RGB 0, 0, 0, 0, 0.2. Okay, let's see if this works. 0.2 doesn't work. 0.8. Yeah. See over here, it's not completely transparent over here. It just creates a shade. 0.8 is a lot, that's why the shade's that dark. But in this case, transparent means PNG. Not necessarily. You could just say for transparent, the opacity just becomes 0. As you can see over here, if the opacity is 0, it becomes completely transparent. PNG, I think it's a different thing. It's like, it's a file type. Okay, so for people who couldn't run it, we can definitely help you out during the lab. Other than that, let me see if there's any other question. Okay, if else statement, do we have to create another variable again for the body and the nav bar? No. Once a variable is already created, the connection is already established. You could just use that variable to change styles again and again. PNG, yeah, I mean, it depends on the file type. Yeah, PNG has a transparent background because most of the time it's a logo, right? Why did you declare it again then? You mean over here in line 14? Yeah, so as you can see, I declared this constant b inside the if block. I didn't declare it inside the else block. That's why I had to declare it again. Does that make sense? Yeah, I have it set to 0 over here. 0 works for transparent. If you want 0.5, so the else will not have access to what's inside the if. Ideally, no. But since we used constant, it just might. Let me try. Because constant, it kind of holds it to a global level. Let's see. Yeah, it does not work, as you can see. So what you have in else cannot really access what's there in if. Does that make sense? Like I was trying the 0.5 opacity over here. Yeah, 0.5 doesn't really make it transparent. 0 does. 0.5 adds more shade to it. Samra has a question, I believe.
Yeah, so why there's no semicolon on line 15 and 16?
Oh, that's my mistake. But since JavaScript is smart, it just ignores it. Okay. For Esra, is your question answered about the if-else statements? Yes, but I don't understand why. So let me annotate. Think of 2 boxes, okay? It's different than using the variables general. No, it's the same. It's exactly the same. So if you have a variable inside this box, say I have B, you won't be able to access that from this particular box. That won't be possible. It has to be declared over here as well. So it works as scopes, right? Now, if I had const declared over there, let me show you. If I had this, let's see if this works. And this. Then it probably should work. Okay, so It's about global variable and local variable. These variables are available for the entire function when you declare it at the very beginning. But if you're declaring it in the if block, only the if block can access it. If you're declaring it in the else block, only the else block can access it. Does it make sense to you, Esra? No. If is a different box, X is a different box. So how you can define a block is based on the curly braces. Where a curly brace begins and where a curly brace ends, that's one block. So as you can see, there's one block, there's two block. Does it make sense? So Dawood is asking, do we have to add these styling elements into the JS file, or we can also add it to the CS file? Yeah, you could also add it to the CS file and just call that styling element. You could do that as well. That's also possible. So you can create a particular styling and you could just call that like a root function. Yeah, of course. Just 1 second. There is a way. You have to first kind of declare the root function first. Okay, I mean, we are kind of over the time for the lecture. We would like to start our lab, but if you want, we can show this in the next lecture for you. Okay? Yeah, so we would like to start the lab in a bit, but I just want to make sure you guys understand what's going on so far. Can you scroll left on the HTML? Yeah, this is as much as it goes to the left. Or do you want this part?
I'm sorry, not HTML, the JavaScript screen.
Okay. Yeah, this is basically it.
Yeah, so if you can scroll it to the other left, yeah,
Over
yes,
here, this is just the
yeah.
name of the image. It's like a very long name, so it just went to that part. But the main code is over here.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. I'll upload this to the canvas. That's not a problem. Any questions? If not, if you guys don't have any more questions, let's go for a 10-minute break and we'll come back for the lab. All right? Summer, do you still have a question?
No, sorry, let me
No
lower
problem.
my hand.
All right. We had a pretty long break. Just bought my ticket to see Guns N' Roses. That's amazing. Okay. So what we will do right now is, as you can see on Canvas, we already have our assignment posted. You can check that out. What you essentially have to do is you will need to, so the website that you see, the recipe website that I built on Friday, and I kind of did some changes on today. So you'll have to make changes for that on your own. You have to make the website more interactive. We have given some suggestions in the description for the website. You can check on Canvas, so you have to do that. Yeah, that's basically it. And also go through the videos that we have uploaded for file navigation and Git. That's also an important part. Any questions about the lab? All right, then you guys begin. What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna create breakout rooms. So if anyone has questions, we can just take them to the breakout rooms. If it works, you can definitely submit that, but you might want to look into why the CSS file wasn't getting connected to your HTML file. I would suggest go through that first and then submit, because since they're asking for a CSS file separately, you might need that. So I would suggest try to go through that. I mean, if you have questions about that, we can definitely help you out, but you would likely need a CSS file as well. Okay, Hannah, you have a question?
Yes, it's about the background and the GS, how we gonna make the website dynamic. It's working now on my computer, but I figured out that the image going over the background color,
Yeah.
even if I put the image in the CSS file.
Can you just give me a second?
Okay. Mm. Mhm.
All
Okay.
right, Hannah, feel free to share your screen. Let's take a look.
I should drop now. I have a meeting now. I'm gonna reconnect within half an hour. Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. So thank you so much. Thank you. Bye bye.
So for the assignment, everyone, we are updating the starter file as well as we speak. So it would be great if you could download the starter file again. It should give you a more clear instruction.